rolling.
Hello, welcome to our time of conversation called The Story Matters. We want to say always, your story matters. Everyone's story matters, our story matters. You happen to have two folks who claim an Irish background. I claim it because my dad always wanted to insist that he was not a member of the Dutch Club, which was a prominent group in our town. And so he bought us all kinds of Irish music. And so we had records to play with Irish music growing up, me and my four sisters. And always had this fantasy about going to Ireland. And so we are pleased to have an Irishman with us, Shawn O'Neil. And Shawn is a writer, he's a storyteller, and many other things which you will discover as we talk. So Shawn, why don't you tell us about yourself?
And I'm American Irish, not from Ireland. I've been there a couple times though.
Yeah.
I primarily work at Middlebury College in the library, in the science library. But I have this passion to tell stories, and it all started when, my dad. I mean, I haven't met any Irishman that doesn't tell a story.
No.
No, we're just storytellers. And my dad used to tell us kids. I grew up in a family with 5 sisters, and during the long travels, throughout the country, my dad had to entertain us. So he would tell long stories on the way up, and I guess that's where I got it from. And then, years later, I became a dad. I have 3 kids, and then every night when they're little, I would tell them stories, bedtime stories. Mm-hmm. And these stories I made up. They weren't like from legendary Irish stories or books. Because I write, and I would tell stories from the characters that I write about. Mm-hmm. And so I did that when the kids got younger, and then as they got older, they kind of lost interest of it. But my oldest daughter, Fiona, she started telling the younger ones stories. Mm. So I remember, kind of listen at the door, and all 3 kids are in the room, and I hear Fiona telling stories, and for some reason they're little kids, so they like animals, and she started telling stories about pugs, because we had a pug, and about Charles the pug, and so Charles the pug became this big long story that Fiona, hopefully one of these days she may write it, who knows. Yeah. But years later, my kids are grown up and heading to college or just finishing high school, and just before the pandemic happened, a couple years before the pandemic happened, I started just telling jokes and puns through colleagues in an email, and then the pandemic hit, and I said, well, I gotta, everybody's working at home, and the world is kind of in chaos because of the pandemic. Mm-hmm. And there's no one knows what's going to happen. So I said, well, I got to up my game. So I started telling stories. Mm-hmm. So the format of and I called them Happy Pun Day and Happy Pun Day and a short story. And I still write them every Friday. At least I try to write them every Friday. So I started collecting these stories, mm-hmm. and I decided to put them in a book. And mm-hmm. And this project that I had kind of took on its own life, so to speak. Mm-hmm. And I thought about it, and I thought, I don't want to tell stories or write a book that's just a bunch of Shawn O'Neil short stories. So most of the stories I write, in fact, I try to do this every time, is I write stories that are personal for me, but they're universal. And for instance, everybody has that crazy relative that they remember in their family. I have my Uncle Billy, and so I wrote a story about Uncle Billy. And so when I put this across through email, and I eventually put it on Facebook too, people would say, "Oh, I remember my Aunt Sharon," or something like that. So it brought their memories, and that was my goal for my stories. So how I came about this book, and I got a name for it, which I'll tell you in a minute how I got that.
Okay. Take your time.
Okay. Was every morning before I head off to work, I meditate in my chair or fall back asleep, depending on what happens. and I one day I was doing this, and I was thinking about my stories and stuff, and then it came to me after my meditation, I gotta write a book where I write the story and then I leave blank pages afterwards so people can write their stories. They can put their memories down. And then I thought, what am I going to call this? I thought of doing the, Happy Pun Day and a short story, and I thought, I got to name something different than that. And then it came to me, Your Life Stories, because I'm telling my life stories, so I want people to tell their life stories. And so, and then on top of that, I had the image, since I'm Irish and Celtic and Celtic symbolism and stuff like that. The image of the Tree of Life came to me. You don't remember what the Tree of Life looks like? Has branch and all the branches and stuff.
Beautiful.
And so that came to me, and then I said, well, since this is Irish, I got to have Irish words. So I actually used Google Translate and put in Your Life Story, and it came out with Scale do Braha. And I'll show you the book in a sec.
Okay.
And it took me a while to really pronounce those words because it was in Gaelic, and I talked to several Irish people from Ireland that spoke Gaelic, and they helped me pronounce it. So I may be totally butchering, Americanizing it, butchering the name of it, but I got to start somewhere. And so I came up with the image. So with this Tree of Life, and woven in the branches is Scale do Braha, Your Life Story. And so I had this vision of this book, and I still continued telling my stories on email and so forth. And I mean, I have over 100 stories, and I call these stories, there's a term called flash fiction, which is very short story. Flash fiction can be one sentence. I would love to see somebody do that. That must be, that's a skill. And so I call my stories between flash fiction and a short story, because my stories are just, a page long, maybe 2 pages. And it's conversation. It's conversation. It's not like grammarly. Because we don't write like we speak, or we speak. We don't speak like we write. We don't say like, the boy ran across the road. We say the boy ran. It's conversational language. That's what I'm calling it.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, so I came up with this concept, and I had it in my head, and I continued telling the stories every Friday. I happened to miss last Friday, but I have it written down. I'll try and put out this Friday. But anyways, I had a chance to go to Ireland, and I brought my daughter Fiona to Ireland because it was a graduation gift for her graduating college. And so we went to Ireland, and while I was in Ireland, I met some Irish people, and when I was there, I happened to be in Dingle, and I were doing the tourist thing, going through the shop and stuff, and I came upon this leather worker shop, and I looked around, and they had she had a little leather journal, which I bought, and had the Tree of Life on it, etched in it, beautiful. It's like, oh, that's what I'm looking for. So I started talking to this woman. Her name was Elaine Waters, and she, we exchanged information, and so she later helped me create the symbol of scaled over a heart.
Oh, isn't that nice?
Yep. And so she first gave me a full leather made one. It was beautiful, costly, and but
Sure.
I'm like, if I want to, I haven't produced this yet. This is like the original copy. I'm working on trying to get that done. And so I started working with this gentleman in Brandon named Eric. He's a bookbinder in Brandon, and he helped me create this book, and he suggested that instead of doing this whole leather thing, which would be very pricey, to have her send just leather things of it, and then he'll put her in the book. And so that's what we did. So this is the product that I got doing this, and this book represents. Here, I'll hold it up. I'll hold it up so people can see it. This book represents, my life story, and here's that leather from Ireland. This is generated leather from Ireland.
Okay.
And the book itself is Vermont made. so that's where this comes in. So this book has 56 of my short stories in it.
Oh, okay.
And I divide them up so people can write in them, and I left like 2 blank pages after so people can write in it.
I like the idea. I really do like the idea of having space for people.
Yeah.
Yes, congratulations.
Oh, thank you. I mean, and everybody needs that space to once they hear a story, they need that space to be creative themselves. And I'm a believer that we're all here to help each other out, and throughout humankind we tell stories to each other, and traditions, passing it on, and nowadays that's moved into the digital world with Facebook and all these social medias.
Right.
But I feel that we should get back to the basics sometimes.
So let me ask you this question. I heard two different expressions, but basically what I heard you saying is you talked about writing, and so often when I hear people talking about stories, they're talking about telling.
Yeah.
So how does writing and telling fit?
Okay.
Are they a different activity, or are they the same activity, or are they? What does it come? If that question makes any sense?
Oh, it totally makes sense. Well, writing is on the spot. You put it down and it's there. Telling a story in person, you get the liberty to expand the story if you need to.
Right.
Once you set it on paper, it's set.
That's it.
Once you tell a story, you can. I mean, if you think about it, if you tell a story, not every story is the same the second time you tell it, because you remember it differently.
Sure.
Or you forgot something of the original story, so you add it to it. So I've kind of used that with that concept of telling stories and writing kind of combined. What I've done is, and I only done this once, is I went to an elderly care place and I read my stories from here to the folks, and then they told me their stories. So in a sense, the writing part of it sparked the telling part of it. So
I like that because it's been 10 years, I think, now, that some of us have been interested and get to know each other
Right.
about storytelling. And one of the things that one person put forth, I can't remember who exactly, but that the goal, the hope was to contribute to a storytelling movement in Vermont, and I thought that's sort of what you're saying too, right?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, some people have they have that wonderful gift of remembering stories, from here and bringing it out from speaking it. And then there's people. I consider myself a writer and a storyteller.
Okay.
And I was a writer first. I'm a writer first. Well, that's not true. I was a storyteller first with my kids and with my dad.
Right.
But it developed into me writing my stories, and I would.
And you like to write.
And I like to write, and I love, and I like to speak too.
Yeah, yeah.
So, I like to tell stories too. So
you all the qualities of a good Irishman.
Yeah, all of course. Just put a Guinness in front of me too. So
Yeah, there you go.
So yeah. So I do understand about I think it is important to have the verbal storytelling too, because with that engages people probably a little bit more than the written part, because they are you two, like we're having this conversation, and we're having stories, we're passing information back and forth, and the words that we say to each other, it's remind us of stories that from ourselves, that we had in our past.
Yeah.
So I do think that's an important part, and with writing and storytelling. I mean, you think, when you see people writing books, they go on their book tours and they start telling about their books and stuff. I guess we could do the opposite. People telling their stories and then do the opposite, then write their book afterwards.
Sure. Yeah. I when we went to Ireland with my sisters, we were flying in into Ireland, and it was foggy.
Oh, yeah.
And so the pilot said, "Well, it's pretty windy, and we may have to go to Dublin in order to." And then he came back on and he said, "No, it's bad there. We may have to go to London." And he said, "No, that's too." That's happening there, so we'll go to Shannon. And so the guy who's the pilot of the plane comes on and says, "We've tried all of these places, and we understand now it's getting a little bit better in Dublin." And he said, if it goes down a little bit more, we'll give it a try. And everybody in the plane goes, because we're going to give it a try.
The Irish humor.
Yeah, it's great. So, do you have some visions that you share about storytelling and story writing that you might want to share?
Yeah.
As a way of encouraging people?
I encourage people to do it.
Yeah.
Don't worry about what people think about your stories.
Mm-hmm.
Tell your stories. Everybody has a story.
Yeah.
And some people are better at telling their stories than others. But it takes practice too. You got to practice telling your stories. Like coming down here, I was thinking, well, what am I going to say about what kind of story am I going to say? I could promote my book and stuff, but it is storytelling. So, one thing I can say is I think when people tell stories, it's a communal, it's a community. You know, when, like I said earlier, when people tell their personal stories, it will bring out the other person's stories. Like you and I,
Yeah,
we
right.
talked about Ireland. So you remember that plane trip?
For a
you know?
long,
Yeah, and I think it's important that we keep those memories and tell those memories for the future generation as well. You know, that's how it all started.
I remember growing up, there was a time when they talked about stories, I almost didn't like them. I didn't like them because the practice was in this community, if someone would start to tell a story, the next person was jumping in on top of them and was saying, "Wow, you should really think about the, or you should hear about this one, or oh, here's my," and then someone is jumping in, and I thought it used to give me a headache, and I said, this is not for me. Then my mother, when we got older, she never wanted to admit her children would lie to her, you know. So she started talking about fibbing. And then I thought, what is she, when you get older, she's not going to talk about us as fibbing. That's a little child, that's a child's word. And then she started to use, are you telling a story? And then so that telling a story became associated with lying to your mother, for heaven's sakes. And so, but then I met people like you, who knew what it meant to pause, to think, to tell, to engage people.
Right.
And then I realized what a great thing storytelling really is, and always be grateful for that.
Right. Part of storytelling is listening.
Listening.
Listen to the stories. You know, when you talk about people jumping in and out, that's chaotic storytelling. That's, that's almost like an argument in a sense. But having this back and forth of you and I are having a conversation, and it turns into a story. So.
Okay. Yeah. So. Well, where am I going to go with that? Because it does tell a story. Tell me what it is that you have enjoyed most in this whole process, and what it is that you would like to build upon.
I enjoy telling the stories, and I enjoy hearing the stories that other people tell. That's my big thing, is the community of storytelling. That we, like I said earlier, we all have stories, and the fact that I'm encouraging people to tell their stories from hearing my stories. That's one of my goals, is to have people tell their stories, and if they want to write them down, write them down.
Yeah, and sitting around it. What's your favorite place to tell a story? If you had a spot where you'd say, this is the storyteller's place, you know.
Yeah, well,
what would it be?
Being Irish, I would love a pub, but
pub, yeah,
a pub would be a good place to tell. You hear all kinds of wild stories there, but I'm not promoting alcohol. People being alcoholics, but a coffee house.
Yeah.
Telling stories at a coffee house, schools.
Yeah. I
I
like kitchen tables.
Ah, yes, kitchen tables.
I love kitchen tables. There's just nothing more than nothing more inviting than a kitchen table.
Right, I agree. Kitchen tables among families.
Yeah.
Yeah, and strangers.
That's right.
If you, not kitchen table, but like a restaurant or something. So.
Do you mind getting up and talking to people and asking, tell me your story, or strangers? Does that feel good to you, or?
Well, I would begin telling my story and then encourage them.
Mhm.
That's how I would do it. I wouldn't be like, "What's your story?"
Yeah.
You got to be, somewhat polite about it. So, yeah.
Yeah. I like just sitting and listening.
Mm-hmm.
I discovered I'm more of a listener than I am a teller, and people say that's crazy, but I say no. If you can't listen, you're not going to be able to tell. So you have some dreams that we might do. You and I and some others
Mm-hmm.
might get together, and I've done this before because I've been working at it for 10 years now.
Right.
Off
You got a lot more experience than I do.
Well,
then.
no, I don't know. Just to say that, well, sometimes have longevity, and you're just so dumb you don't know when to stop, and you say, yeah, it's going to work one of these days, and that sort of thing. So where would you gather people?
Well, I mentioned coffee shops before. I think, I think having food and beverages in storytelling is I think I like that.
Yeah, it's absolutely right.
Yeah, because you're full, you're happy. And well, of course, don't talk with your mouth full.
Yeah.
But coffee houses, libraries, have it right here.
Yeah,
Have story time
right.
in the library. Like I did with elderly care places, and
Right.
where I engage the audience so they can tell their stories.
Mhm.
That's I like that.
I used to do a piece with emergencies. Yeah, no, with up on the hill.
Right.
Anyway, that's the place where the elders gather.
Oh, right. Yeah. Do you know who's really good storytellers?
No.
Kids.
Yes.
But the only thing
Kids.
with that is if you kind of gotta corral them a little bit because
Yes, yeah.
they might
And help them to.
help them guide them in their storytells because you might have a little kid that just keeps on going and going and going.
Yeah. That's so. There's just no end, is there?
No.
There's no end. I mean, we could gather, and we have some friends who gather from previous experiences we've had.
Mhm.
In fact, recently, some of us went and got together, and we were telling stories.
Right.
So, Shawn, it is great to meet another Irishman who loves to tell stories and loves to be involved with that. So, the world belongs to us
Right.
to come and tell a story, and as long as you have good stories to tell,
Right.
it's a good day.
Yep.
It's
Thank you for inviting me.
Well, thank you for coming. And remember, stories matter, and enjoy your storytelling and your story listening and your story hearing. Take care.